This episode of Derek and Matt Love Comics recorded November 4th, 2018. You can find Derek and Matt Love Comics on all the usual places: Podbean, iTunes, Stitcher Radio, Google Play Music, and TuneIn. You can contact the show, Derek and Matt Love Comics at gmail.com, on Facebook.com/Derek and Matt, on Twitter at Derek and Matt, on Instagram at Derek and Matt. Our YouTube channel is Derek and Matt Love Comics, and please enjoy the show. Hey yo, comic book fans, it's Matt, and you're listening to Derek and Matt Love Comics, the show where two friends talk sci-fi, movies, animation, comic books, and all things we geek out about. With me is the man quietly wearing a Guy Fawkes mask as November the 5th approaches, Derek. How's it going, Derek?
Not too bad, Matt. Wait, give me a second. Can't breathe this thing. Not too bad. How are you, Matt?
I honestly didn't hear a difference.
That ruined that joke, then.
No, the joke was that there was a prominent difference, but...
Oh. Gosh, you're always so mean to me.
It's for the show, man. It's for the show.
Yeah.
I'm good if...
Just the show.
Yep, it never happens off the show.
Not once.
I'm good other than fighting off a ball of snot in my throat. So if you hear me go quiet, that's what I'm doing, is taking care of that.
Sure the audience enjoys hearing that.
We'd listen to you talk about how you were sweating all summer.
That's true. I sweated a lot. It was nasty.
And you didn't shut up about it.
Oh. No, well, I did until now.
All right, well, let's actually talk about something that someone wants to hear about and get on to what we were doing this week.
Already?
A number of things we both did. So we... I can't say this one without setting it up. What night was it? Monday night? Yeah, I think it was Monday night. Yeah, because we recorded the last show on Monday because of watching Evolution last Sunday. And it's Monday night, and we finished watching Monday Night Raw, and I said, I should get to bed because I got to get up early for work, and I'm very tired. And you said that you were agitated, and you needed to calm down.
Right.
And
it was my anxiety was acting up that night.
Right, and your exact words were, I need to calm down. And then I said, let's watch The Exorcist. because that sounds like a solution to the problem that we're both having. So, one of us being tired and the other one being agitated or on edge, and we decide to watch, like, probably the most scariest movie ever made. Even if you don't find the movie scary, the movie is nerve-wracking to watch because of the way they set everything up.
Oh yeah, it's still an incredibly disturbing film.
And I hadn't seen it in a couple of years, so and you had just recently got it on Blu-ray, so yeah, we watched The Exorcist. Man, it's still a damn good flick, right?
Whatever else it is, it's a very good movie.
I've had plenty of people tell me because of their beliefs or their lack thereof that they can't find that movie enjoyable or scary or whatnot, and I can understand not finding it scary, but then again, like I said, the movie is nerve-wracking. I don't see how you can't enjoy the movie making of this movie.
Right. Oh yeah. It's incredibly well-done movie. I think it's one of the greatest movies ever made. I did find it funny because I had one of my online Facebook friends said that I obviously must not have been raised Catholic because she was and she can't watch the movie. And I said, answer God, I was raised Catholic.
I think the both of us were raised incredibly Catholic.
Oh, yeah. I was an altar boy for years.
I was an altar boy, not for years, but I was an altar boy.
And my parents, my father was minister of the Eucharist, my mother was the head of the baptismal committee. So they were both Catholic school board elementary school teachers, so I was raised very Catholic.
And we both went to Catholic school.
But I just find it an incredibly entertaining and fascinating film, so it's never really bothered me.
I've actually only seen it a handful of times. I didn't see it until maybe I was late 20s, early 30s, and they put it back in theaters after they had done the the version you've never seen. After they put that together, and a friend of mine and I went and saw it in the theater, and that was the first time and I knew a lot of the stuff about it and from it and whatnot, but it was the first time I'd seen it proper.
Yeah,
And then
Mhm.
I've seen it a handful of times on DVD since I bought the DVD.
This is one of the many, many films that I first saw when I was 13 or 14 on late night TV. And anytime it used to be on late night television, I would end up watching it absolutely every time. And then, same with you, I end up getting it on DVD with the version you've never seen, which, oddly enough, I end up seeing many, many times.
Well, that's the only version I've ever seen. So,
So yeah, and so yeah, I mean, like, this is a movie I've seen, like, gosh, I don't know, 30 times maybe in my life, maybe more, maybe less, I don't know. But yeah, it's a movie that has been one of my favorite horror films for nearly 30 years, even though the movie itself is, what, 45 years old, if not older?
yeah, it's mid-70s, right? It's a little,
Yeah,
it's a little bit older than us.
I think it came out in 72 or 73, so yeah, about 45 years. But yeah, no, it's a great film, great performances, really spooky stuff, some stuff that is a bit amusing.
Well, okay, so the way that I avoided getting too agitated by it, or there's there's a few like jump scares in it, and there's a lot of just like really cool. I think one of the reasons this movie works is because there's a lot of cool, like, here's a scene where something incredibly normal is happening, and then they like, it's a short scene, like literally like a 30-second scene, and then you jump to like maybe a 10 to 15-second scene where something terrifying is happening, and then jump back because it's following both the priest's character and the mother and her daughter character throughout the film, and it's interspersed back and forth until they come together. So you're jumping back and forth, and it's like a good moment in one of their lives, and then immediately a bad moment in the other ones, and back and forth. So it's like constantly just hitting you with stuff. So one of the ways I avoided like just getting hammered by it was reading a bunch of trivia about the movie on Internet Movie Database as we watched it, which included a bunch of like weird casting choices for people originally up for Father Karras and up for Regan and her mother, and all these actresses who quote unquote almost were that part. Whether any of them are really true or not is suspect, but it was interesting.
Yeah, I'm sure it was much easier for me to get through watching the movie because I was talking with you throughout the entire thing. I probably would have. There was no way I would have watched it on my own, given the state that my anxiety was that evening. But just hanging out, watching a movie, regardless of what it was, and hanging out with you, really helped me relax. And it was a lot better afterwards. One of the things I like about The Exorcist, and I never thought about it before watching it with you on Monday, is that if you think about it, it's very much a procedural film because there's something wrong with Regan, and something wrong with Regan, and we watch them investigate and try to figure out what it is, and going through everything with like psychological testing, neurological testing, and you really get in depth into all the different things that if this was a real situation, what they would probably doctors at that time would attempt to do, which really helps give the movie kind of that feeling of verisimilitude, or like reality. It's just funny because watching again, realizing that probably the most disturbing moment in the movie is whenever they're feeding the line. They have this huge needle that they put through one of Regan's arteries in her neck,
right,
to feed the wide, like a tube into the blood vessel down to her heart, and you just got the pulsing blood just going spritzing right out. I could imagine that. I think that scene more than any probably caused a lot of people to pass out back in 1973.
That was something we actually read on the in the trivia. Was multiple people, the director, different actors and actresses said that they're in their experience seeing the film with audiences and whatnot, that was the scene that caused the most reaction.
Because take out all the context of everything to do with the religious stuff and the possession, everything like that, that in itself is a disturbing scene.
Well, depending on your faith or whatnot, the movie might be a fantasy, but that is a very real thing. It's a very real medical procedure that looks traumatizing. So,
Oh yeah.
so it's a real moment in the film. We also watched, I believe the night before Halloween, we watched Psycho because it's a classic, and I have only ever seen it once, and I think I liked it a lot more this time than I did the previous time, and I did like it the previous time. So
I thought you'd seen. I thought we had watched Psycho every year the last 4 Halloweens.
no, I think we only watched it once. I think we watched it 2 years ago, and then we somehow didn't get it in last year.
Huh. That surprises me.
Okay. Yeah, I have it logged on
Well,
Letterboxd
it
twice.
does. Okay. Yeah, I'm just surprised because I would have thought that we had watched it more often and that you had seen it more often.
No, the first time I ever saw it proper was watching it with you after I bought it on Blu-ray.
Okay. Yeah, I have it on DVD. It's one of the films I have on my 14 filmed velvet covered box set of Universal that Universal released like I think 10, 12 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, it's another one that I'd seen whenever I was like in high school and that. Yeah, it's a classic, great film. Not really sure what to really get into.
Because when I first started building my digital movie library, I received a number of films for free. I actually have the remake, and I know it's not supposed to be any good, but I'm tempted to watch it just for comparison's sake.
I saw that once on cable television on the movie network TMN whenever it came out. I have not seen it since. It was just the one time. I remember thinking, yeah, it's very well done. They managed to replicate basically everything. But still don't see the point. But every time you watch, if you've seen the remake, every time you watch the original, it just hits home how badly miscast Vince Vaughn was in the remake. Because the whole premise and the intention that Hitchcock had was that he wanted to cast someone against type who would not be perceived as a threat. And Anthony Perkins at that time was doing all romantic comedies, and he was and romantic dramas, and he was a leading man, and boy next door type guy. So he was the kind of guy who you wouldn't expect him to be a psychopathic killer.
Mm-hmm.
So it was supposed to be a shock. Vince Vaughn spends the entire remake lumbering over everyone and threatening and scowling over them, and he looks like he's like a monster who's about to snap at any moment. I remember whenever the movie came out that there were critics that were saying that they should have cast Jeremy Davies
Mm-hmm.
From the little guy from Saving Private Ryan.
Yeah.
And honestly, he probably would have been a better choice, far better than Vince Vaughn.
Yeah, I always thought Vince Vaughn was a weird choice, and that was without having ever seen the original. I remember when that movie was getting made, I'm like, why him?
Yeah, I cannot understand it. There are
I think
a lot of other
I think they probably thought they were casting against type because they hired a guy who's traditionally kind of a funny guy.
Right, but the problem is that he just comes off as this beast at all times because Vince Vaughn is a very big man.
No, right, yeah, he's a big guy, and that's probably the biggest problem with the movie that I could see without having actually seen the movie. Like, just looking at it from the outside, I'm like, why put him in that position? The other thing we did is on Halloween night, we were contemplating watching this Halloween movie or that Halloween movie or last, chance to watch whatever. And you and I and our mutual friend Dan decided that we were going to watch an old WCW Halloween Havoc pay-per-view. And we narrowed it down to 1997 or 1998, and I let you pick. And I prefaced it by saying that 1997 had one of my favorite matches of all time, and 1998 had what I considered to be one of the worst matches of all time. And you went with the better one because you picked 97.
I picked 97, but I was very close to picking 98 because I frankly, I wanted to see how bad it could be, and I thought that might be more fun to watch. That it might be more fun to watch a really bad pay-per-view.
Right.
But then I decided that I was just more interested in the card for 97, so I just decided we should just go with that. I do eventually want to watch 98, though.
Yeah, we'll have to do that. So the highlights are, I remember Jericho almost killing Gato with the Jericho spike in that match, but I had completely misremembered that. I was wrong on that one. It was Jericho about killed himself doing the Jericho spike. Gato didn't look too bothered by it.
he got out of the ring quickly, but yeah, I was not. You had told me that there was a spot that Jericho never used to be one of Jericho's signature moves, but then he never used it again after that, and I had never seen it, so I wasn't sure what to expect, and I didn't know what it would look like, so I wasn't expecting it, and then when it actually happened, and I was surprised because all I could think was, oh my God, Jericho almost killed himself.
Yeah, so the move in question is a top rope Frankensteiner, but not with the opponent sitting on the top turnbuckle and the attacker standing on the second rope and then getting into the Frankenstein position, with both guys standing on the top rope. So it's significantly higher, and one guy has to jump from the top rope up into the Frankensteiner position before hooking and pulling the other guy over. Jericho didn't get him over. Basically landed on his head, and then Geto landed on top of him.
Right.
And folding Jericho up.
Yeah, Jericho came very close to snapping his neck. His own neck.
Right. He was messed up. And you could tell the rest of the match that he wasn't right.
Right. It really explains, having seen it now, why he never used the move again.
Yeah, I've read interviews with him where he said, even at the time, saying he would never do that move again. But I really remembered it as Geto being the one that got hurt, and I was wrong. The other thing, the match that I say is one of my favorite matches of all time, is Rey Mysterio Jr. versus Eddie Guerrero in a mask versus cruiserweight title match. It's like 21, 22-year-old Rey Mysterio, and he is just magic. He's lighter than air. He has no knee problems. He has no back problems, and he is just watching him move is it's a real life superhero. It's like watching Spider-Man.
Yeah, I was actually surprised. I'm sure I probably saw Ray once or twice around this time, but he never really paid attention, and I didn't really know him as quote-unquote Rey Mysterio until he really joined WWE a few years later.
It would have been 5 or 6 years later at least.
Something like that. I think it was around 2003.
Yeah, that sounds right.
And I was shocked at how lean he looked in this.
Yeah, he was tiny.
Because whenever he joined WWE, he, as you said when we were watching it, that Halloween Havoc on Wednesday, you said that he was really jacked whenever he joined WWE, and it's true. Because he was a little guy, but he's like massive.
He probably put on 20 pounds when he came to WWE.
But watching him younger, leaner, I was shocked because I've always known Rey Mysterio to be a very athletic guy who was very agile. But seeing him that leaner and younger, I'm trying to think of the wording, but I wasn't expecting him to be so much more athletic and agile and quicker. Because there was a noticeable difference to me.
Yeah, like I said, he's a real life superhero. He was just moving so incredibly fast.
The other thing that surprised me is I didn't realize. Okay, I always knew whenever he was in WWE that he would, for like pay-per-views, he would wear the costumes that were outfits and the masks and that would pay homage to superheroes or supervillains, from comic books and that. I didn't think he was doing that back then in 97, because he comes out and he's basically wearing the Phantom, the Lee Falk character.
Right.
outfit, and I was surprised. It looked really cool.
No, I've seen matches with Ray from earlier than this where he was wearing a classic Spider-Man outfit. So Ray would have been 23 at the time of this match. Actually, he was
21.
born in December, so he would have been 22. Yeah, so he was a very young Rey Mysterio at the time. But, you got to remember, I think he started wrestling professionally at 13.
Right, so he would have already been a veteran for quite a while.
So the final quote unquote highlight of the night is the Roddy Piper versus Hulk Hogan cage match that was just a cluster.
Mm-hmm.
They keep saying that it's the first to escape the cage. They quote unquote both escape the cage at the same time, even though Hogan clearly escapes first. They end up back in the cage. The match is not ended, and the match ends up ending by a submission, even though they never said pins and submissions were allowed. On top of all this, you have a bunch of guys dressed as Sting coming down to ringside and just standing around the ringside watching. Randy Savage coming down, climbing the cage, leaping from the top of the cage, and interfering in the match. And then a straight up legit fan in a Sting t-shirt and Sting makeup getting in the ring and just getting destroyed by Savage and Hogan.
So many things wrong with the booking in this episode, this match. I don't understand what the reasoning was for having all the Stings come out if they weren't going to use them for anything.
To me, the reasoning is you have them all come out, which one's really Sting, and then the real Sting comes down from the rooftop, to close the show out and attack Hogan, but that never happened.
Right. So there was no payoff for all the Stings being there, and I still have to believe that the fan climbing over had to be a plant, because no one really tried. Okay, one of the fake Stings tries to stop him, but security doesn't come out to grab him, and Hogan and I've seen Hogan and Savage hit fans that WCW that jumped over and tried to get into a match. I've seen them smack them around that, but usually it's very brief, and they don't like focus on it. This, they brought the guy into the ring and they just kept working on him. So I think it's gotta have been staged.
To me, the big issue to me is that the camera stayed on it. Not any of the actions of Hogan or Savage, but the fact that the camera stayed with it. I could see
Right.
Savage doing the exact same thing, hoping that he was leading the camera away or whatever, because I've seen him do it in other matches. So I think we both listened to the Tony Schiavone podcast about this pay-per-view.
Well, I did. I listened to that the next day, and Schiavone said that he never heard anything about what was going on, so he always just assumed it was a real fan. But this is why I want to hear Bischoff talk about this pay-per-view, because I want to know if it was true or not. Because to me, half the time, I've only listened a bit to Tony Schiavone's podcast, but it always seems like he didn't really know what was going on with any of the booking and that, because he was just the play-by-play guy and the announcer, and he was in the dark about a lot of the goings-on. And so it's like his take on it can't be definitive.
I mean, I definitely would like to hear Bischoff's take on this. Unfortunately, they did not do 97 this year, so we'll have to wait till Halloween of next year to hope that they do 97. Because they did 95 and I think 91 this year on Bischoff's podcast. Yeah, I'd love to hear what Bischoff has to say about this. I did some other further reading, and everyone seems to think that it was actually a fan and not a plant. But I'd love to hear Bischoff say so.
Right. But one of the other things that makes me think it was a plant is that his makeup was too well done. It was exactly the same style, the way that Sting did it, because where it wasn't like rubbing off or anything. It was peeling off as they were roughing him up.
Mm-hmm.
It was like it was the exact same product that Sting used. Yeah, I think it was a plant. I think just that they just screwed up the entire booking for the match. It was weird. It was a weird match.
It was definitely a weird match. So what else have you done?
I'm trying to remember what day it was. I think it was Thursday night. I ended up, might have been Wednesday night, but I'm not exactly sure what day it was. But I decided that since we had watched Psycho and I knew you had already watched The Birds, I decided to watch that myself. Because frankly, it's my favorite Hitchcock film. I had wanted to watch it with you before, but you end up watching it on your own. So I decided, what the heck, middle of the night, I'm just gonna put it on. So I ended up watching it. I still love that movie. That movie is such a good movie.
It's a really good movie.
I know there are people who say that Psycho is the best Hitchcock film. There are people who say it's Vertigo. Some say Rear Window, or even Dial M, if not some of his earlier stuff. But man, The Birds just entertains me. I just love how that movie starts off as this cute and charming romantic comedy, and everything's cute, and it's going around, and she's chasing after that guy, and she's playing around, and setting up the thing, this, and it's all cute done, and then a seagull dive bombs and hits her in the head, and from that point on, the movie just skews, like at a right angle, just runs the other way, and by the time the movie's done, you've just watched this really disturbing, nightmarish, apocalyptic horror film. But it starts off as something really cute and kind of bubbly.
Yeah, it's totally like an old style romantic comedy at first.
Yeah, I think that was actually probably deliberate. The idea of trying to catch the audience goes in expecting a horror movie, and then giving them a romantic comedy so that whenever it shifts gears, it's that much more shocking, rather than just have the audience go in and have it be shocking right from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Which, if you think about it, kind of fits with the tone for Psycho, because Psycho opens and you got basically a melodrama where a girl working as a secretary at this office ends up stealing the money and what's going to happen? Is she going to get caught by the police? Oh, she gets the safety of the motel, and then things go askew in that film, and end up with something completely different. So it's not like The Birds was something that Hitchcock hadn't done before. The tonal shift. It's much more extreme in The Birds, because some of the imagery in The Birds is really disturbing.
Oh yeah.
Whenever the mother, played by Jessica Tandy, finds the one neighbor dead, and his eyes have been pulled out, and so all you see is just the black orbs of his eye sockets, which I'm sure was just done with makeup. But the way it's shot, it's very effective. Yeah, I just think it's a terrific film. I was looking at trying to get it on Blu-ray, and apparently a lot of the Blu-ray reviews say that it's one film that does not really hold up whenever you put in high definition, because it just makes the matte screen matte effects of The Birds on top of everything just that much more glaring.
I mean, I have it on Blu-ray. I don't agree with that.
Really? So it's something I should probably still consider buying.
I mean,
okay.
I don't. I think some of the matte lines in that movie are fairly visible, but I don't think they're any more or less visible being on Blu-ray.
Okay. But other than The Birds, last night I actually I've talked in the past about how I really liked the Leonard Nimoy TV show from the 70s, In Search of.
Mm-hmm.
I finally watched the first episode of the Zachary Quinto update series that just started this year. I found out that the show is actually airing on my History Channel on demand, and they don't have all the episodes, but they have, I think, the first 6 and then the 10th. But I only watched the first last night, and it wasn't bad. It's very different from the original show. The original show was narrated by Leonard Nimoy. You would get some footage of him on location or in the studio talking to the camera for like a couple of minutes in any random episode, but generally he was just a disembodied voice speaking over everything, and the majority of the episodes had one-sided interviews with doctors and scientists and experts and historians, that where you would just be seeing their response and explaining things, and whatever the topic was. This is very different because it's Zachary Quinto actually doing investigative reporting, where he's narrating, but we're also watching him go from place to place and actually interviewing people himself and participating in the experiments and everything. So it's very different in that regard.
Yeah, I wouldn't have expected that.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting it either. It's really surprising. But again, I only watched the first episode, which was about superhumans, and it wasn't bad. I'm probably going to try watching a couple more of the episodes to see, because I'm not sure if I necessarily liked the show. I know I did not dislike it,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't know if it's going to be something that I'm going to end up following in the foreseeable future.
Okay.
But I'm still going to give a few more episodes a try. Other than that, that's pretty much it for me this past week. What about you?
Okay, so quickly I'll say watched WWE Crown Jewel. Terrible pay-per-view. One of the worst pay-per-views I've ever seen in my life. I'm not exaggerating. And this has nothing to do with the politics of the show either, because I liked the Greatest Royal Rumble pay-per-view quite a bit. This just was booked terribly almost from top to bottom. There were actually a handful of good matches. The WWE title match, AJ and Joe, was good, and what was the no, I guess Seth didn't have a good match. I guess Seth's match with Dolph wasn't bad. It had a stupid ending, but it wasn't bad. The Universal title match was terrible. The ending of the tournament was terrible. It was not a good show. I watched Doctor Who episode 4, which you talked about last week. I think with every episode I like the show more. I should say, I think I like every episode more than the previous. So, it's a really strong show this season. I finished out DuckTales Season 1, which I had like half the episode, maybe like a third of the episodes sitting on my DVR that I hadn't finished. Man, so that show got off to a slow start because they were kind of bouncing it around, and it went from one of the Disney networks to the other. It was like, I think it was on Disney HD, and then or XD or whatever the one station is called, and they moved it to the Disney Kids channel. And I was really worried that the show wasn't going to continue. They were going to like just get all the episodes pushed out and then be done with it type thing, like they do with Beware the Batman or the Green Lantern cartoon. But they found a home for it on their other network, and they started season 2. And season 1 was it really ended strong. It was a really fun show with a good overarching plot for all the episodes and a nice wrap up in the end of the season. Really genuinely good mysteries and fun action adventure stuff, on top of being very funny. One of the things I discovered while watching it is, so they gave all the nephews individual personalities and voices, as opposed to the typical portrayals of the nephews. I don't believe that I actually like any of the nephews individually. Huey's like, sort of, I don't know, like I guess like the stick in the mud type, and he's, like everything by the book, everything by the rules type character. Louis is just like greedy, and he's like a kind of a con man, and Dewey is like an idiot who's super self-centered, and I kind of don't like any of them. But when you put them together, for some reason they all work playing off of each other. So they're definitely characters that are stronger together than apart. Whereas, in the original show, or even in the old classic cartoons, the three nephews are essentially three of the same character. They're very generic characters.
Right.
So,
yeah, they are complete carbon copies of one another in the original.
Right. Dewey's probably the most annoying because of the fact that he is kind of incompetent, but is completely self-centered and everything in the world's about him. He just comes off, because he comes off like he knows what he's doing, but he obviously doesn't, and that gets really, really annoying.
So he's not just obnoxious; he's obnoxious and incompetent, which is a horrible combination.
Yes.
Yeah, I can see that being really frustrating. You said it was Louis who is the stick in the mud?
No, Huey. Louis is the kind of greedy con man type.
Okay. So Huey's the stick in the mud, and for some reason, whenever you first started describing him, the first thing I was imagining was Homer Simpson describing Milhouse.
Kind of.
I don't know why, but it just popped in my head. I'm trying to remember exactly what he said.
Just when he talks about him being a little wiener, or when he...
yeah, a little wiener.
Or when he says...
He's complaining about saying, my son's got this friend, Milhouse.
Yeah.
Yeah, that.
Yeah. It kind of like on the show, you know how they always did like the Junior Woodchuck thing where they were scouts or whatever? On the new show, Huey's the only one that's a Junior Woodchuck, and he's very much about like science and learning, and you know the other ones call him a nerd, or really it's more Louis that calls him a nerd than anything, but he's very much like, oh no, this is the way to do this type thing. And you know, he's definitely like the book smart one, but he doesn't actually have field experience, so he's like, well, I've read about this and this is the way you do it, you know. Whereas you have like Louis, or sometimes even Dewey, saying things like, you're gonna take the fun out of this adventure by making it about learning. Although one of them said that to Webby at one point, and Webby said everything's about learning.
It's starting to seem like Webby's the best out of the four.
Oh, Webby's fantastic on the show. I love Webby on the show. They really gave her a personality versus the old show. She's a Scrooge McDuck and Clan McDuck fangirl and historian, so she knows like everything about Scrooge and all of his past adventures, and she's just happy to be there, like on the same team because she idolizes him. But she's also incredibly awkward because she grew up in the mansion by herself with her grandmother raising her while being the maid to Scrooge. So like she doesn't know how to interact with the boys when they first show up on the show.
Right.
Because she's been there by herself all this time. So yeah, she's a really fun character. I read Heroes in Crisis number 2. You might remember that I didn't have very much good to say about number 1. Number 2 kind of completely turns that around. I really enjoyed the issue. However, there is still a problem with it, because I enjoyed the issue because I really enjoy Tom King's dialogue writing. And we got some great character interactions, great dialogue writing in this episode. Or this issue, I should say. That being said, out of a 22-page or 24-page comic, like 20-some pages were great dialogue character interactions. And the remaining 2 or 4, whatever it was the plot advancement. There was almost no plot advancement in this issue. So it was great conversations, but it doesn't really advance anything. Also, I thought they introduced a concept, the concept that they have the sanctuary, but the heroes are worried that the world at large will find out that they have these problems and that they even need a place to go like this, and then not trust the heroes, thinking they might be damaged. They introduced that concept almost as a throwaway concept, and I find that vastly more interesting than any of the murder mystery stuff that was set up in the first issue. I think they should have led with that.
Yeah, it's really starting to seem like there isn't very much of a plot to this miniseries, and it's basically going to be filler stuff until we get to the final 2 issues. Because if you think about this, given all the technology, and the characters involved, this is a mystery that should not be a mystery for very long.
Which Wonder Woman almost says in the issue. Wonder Woman says to Batman at one point, I know you know who did this because it's easy for you to figure stuff out like this out.
Well, it's not just that. You have Batman, the world's greatest detective. You have Wonder Woman with her lasso can get... Even if someone without spoilers or anything, even if someone committed the crime and without realizing that they committed the crime because they were, I don't know, mind controlled or in a altered state, the lasso is supposed to cut through any kind of delusion and get a person to say the truth, even if they don't realize that that's the truth, because it's enchanted. And then you have Superman with his super senses and everything. There is no reason that this mystery is being dragged out this long. It should have been solved within moments.
Right.
Because even if Batman does not have working cameras or anything recording the events that happened, he should still be able to figure out who the actual culprit was pretty quickly with just good old-fashioned forensics. Is that actually happening in the story?
I mean, Booster Gold went to Barry Allen to ask him to do the same thing, what you're saying that Batman should be able to do, and it seemed like Barry did it very, very quickly and came up with an answer. So,
yeah, I don't know. This seems like a very short story that's being dragged out just for the sake of a trade.
It seems very contrived to me.
Yeah, the entire thing sounds incredibly contrived.
And the last thing I did, and we'll try to get through, although it was the main thing I did, but the segment's running a little long, is I went to see Bohemian Rhapsody, the Bryan Singer Queen biography movie. So I liked this movie quite a bit, especially the last third. I've seen some... Okay, so the critical consensus has been that it was cookie cutter and it was sanitized and it was not in depth enough. But I've seen a lot of people, I'll point out, a lot of musicians saying how much they enjoyed the movie. I do think the movie does the thing where they take events that happened and conflate them or combine them or change the timeline around a little bit to help with a narrative. Some of it's just so they can get all of it in by having stuff happen at the same time instead of possibly months and possibly years apart in real life. But you just kind of need to show that this thing happened, so you put it in where you can. Other movies have done this. Walk the Line did this. You know, probably the most egregious example of this, and it's the one that a lot of people are complaining about, is that Freddie finds out that he's HIV positive in '85 before they perform at Live Aid, and in real life it was probably late '96 to mid '97 when he found out.
You mean '86?
Yeah, '86. Yes, I'm sorry, '86 or '87 when he found out. I've read different estimates because obviously he didn't make it public until the day before he died, so different people say different things, but nobody says anything about it being as early as '85. But in the context of the movie, and you know, it's a biographical movie, but at the same time, I think this or Ray or Walk the Line or any of the Doors, any of those movies like that, they essentially are fictionalized versions of what really happened. You know, I feel like any based on a true story movie is like that to a degree.
Mm-hmm. Oh, definitely.
And
if you want the actual truth, watch a documentary.
Right, and the Live Aid sequence finishes out the movie. So they didn't stick around for the next 2 years of him finding out he was HIV positive. So putting it where they put it, just so we could have him deal with it and have him have the conversation with the band about how he didn't want anyone to know and he just wanted to continue making music. By the way, I've read from sound engineers, producers, and multiple members of the band all the same thing, that when he was sick, he told everybody, just keep writing music, just keep coming up with stuff for me to sing. I don't want to think about it. I just want to keep performing. And even if I don't finish this stuff, you put it all together after I'm gone. You know, and they present that in the movie, and they presented it earlier than it actually happened to make it fit into the time frame of the movie they were covering. So is it a problem? Nah, I don't know if it's a problem. It didn't bother me. I didn't find anything like offensive that, oh my god, they changed this and it was horrible. The other thing is, a lot of people are saying it's a sanitized version of his life because it was, I believe, a PG-13 movie. And I guess the suggestion has been that they tried to make it as least gay as possible so it wouldn't offend people. I don't know. I don't really agree with that. I mean, you have guys kissing guys. You have him clearly being attracted to other men. It's not like they shied away from that. Did we have a full-on sex scene? No. Did we? Which, Star is Born, we did. a lot of rated R movies, we can get a full on sex scene. You know, we didn't have a full on sex scene. We
Right.
had implications of orgies, but we didn't really see anything in the orgies. So
You're not going to get sex scenes and orgies in a PG-13 film.
I see. I don't remember exactly what it was rated, but it seems to me like it was PG-13. Like if I had to make a guess, I don't think it was rated R. I guess I'll look it up because it seemed to me like it fit everything required for a PG-13 rating. Let's see if I can find the certification. Usually it's right there on the page, on the Wikipedia page, but I am not seeing it. Nope. Let's look somewhere else real quick. This is good radio.
Usually I'm quiet during these moments.
No, usually you say, this is a professional podcast.
That's true.
Oh, that's a trailer. Shut up.
We don't have clearance to air trailers.
We don't. Oh, jeez, really? Wow, I apologize because this is fascinating. I'm on IMDb and I'm not seeing the rating anywhere.
That is weird.
What? Oh, no, PG-13. So I was right.
Okay.
Yeah, so I thought it within a PG-13 movie they fit everything. Now, you could make the argument that it should have been a rated R movie so they could get other stuff in or whatever. I don't know. I don't think it was hurt by it. You know? I also feel like
One thing that kind of bothers me is, okay, the people saying that it was, oh gosh, I'm trying to remember the phrase that was used, or I should say the hat that is being used the most about it. I think it's de-queering the story of Freddie Mercury. And everything you've just said seems like they're pretty open about it.
Yeah, I mean,
Freddie being bisexual. Are people angry that they included anything having to do with? Because a lot of people today think that Freddie Mercury was just gay, that he was just a homosexual man, whereas he was bisexual because he had relationships with women and men, and he was attracted to both. And I just keep wondering if the people who are accusing it of downplaying the LGBT themes is because it's not 100% Freddie's gay in the movie, but actually doing the story about how he was bisexual.
Right.
Is that what it is?
Maybe. I mean,
why people are objecting?
A lot of the movie, he's just alone. Like a lot of the movie is about him being alone. You know, and a lot of the movie, it's like this guy with all his money in this house with all of his cats, and he doesn't really have anyone he's close to.
I think that was for most of his life. I think that was actually the case. He had the close relationship with his girlfriend throughout most of the 70s.
Right, but they moved on to the point, like in the 80s, where she's trying to get on with her life, and as much as she loves him, she's getting on with her life, and he as presented in the movie, he's kind of sitting around like hoping everything would just stay still exactly the way I don't even think I told you about this. There's a scene where she comes to see him and he finds out that she's pregnant, and his immediate reaction is, how could you? And it was like he didn't want anything to change. Like they were no longer together, but he wanted everything to be exactly as it was when they were together, you know? And it's like he had a really hard time accepting that she was moving on with her life.
The only thing I would question about is that the movie ends with Live Aid in '85, and we do know that after that he ended up with his steady boyfriend, who he would be with for the remainder of his life.
Right, who gets introduced right before the Live Aid sequence. He actually gets introduced way earlier in the movie, but then like they get together right before the Live Aid sequence. So
I mean,
Jim
like,
Hutton.
Right. If they ever did a sequel to this movie dealing with the final years of Freddie Mercury's life, I'm sure that would be much more of a focus, because that relationship ends up becoming much, much more stronger. But for a good chunk of Freddie's life before that relationship started, it really was around with him and it's Kate, right?
Oh,
Kate?
Mary Austin.
Mary Austin. And they remained friends for the remainder of his life.
Right. She lived in his house until she died. Or no, she's still alive, so she still lives in his house. You know, they get into like when Paul Prenter is his personal manager and is kind of manipulating him and stuff. I've never read anything like about this, but they made it out like they were a couple at the time. Like not only was this guy controlling everything about his life, but they were technically like together. So they almost made him like an overbearing husband or whatever.
Yeah, I've never heard this before. I mean that they were in a relationship. I've never heard that.
See, I don't even know if it qualified as them being in a relationship. It was almost like Prenter had Freddie as like his famous friend that he would bring to these gay orgies and stuff to like as like his mark of look how an important person I am type thing. And like it was definitely playing it off like they were it was more his meal ticket but then almost like a trophy wife too. So and I guess they never 100% say what the actual relationship is. They do show them making out at one point.
What's weird is all of this that we are discussing right now, I don't see how that any of this makes it de-queering.
No,
because it seems like it's all over the film.
I don't agree with that statement at all. So like I don't see how it was de-queered. So okay, forget all that. Rami Malek is mesmerizing. This movie could just be nothing but garbage and he could have given the same performance and it'd still be worth seeing. He is mesmerizing as Freddy. He is almost Freddy come back to life. He does such a good job, and it's going to get overlooked because of how good he was. All the guys that play the rest of the band were great. I thought Tom Hollander as Jim Beach was really good. Lucy Boynton as Mary was really good. There's really good performances in this movie. I mean, Raimi's definitely got the best one. He's also got the most interesting character, to be fair. But, I thought Gwilym Lee as Brian May was really good. I thought Ben Hardy as Roger Taylor was really good. And Joseph Mazzello as John Deacon. I never thought of John Deacon as the funny one in the band, but that's the way they presented him, and he was very amusing. So it's totally worth... Okay, so if you're a fan of Queen and you love their music, it's totally worth seeing just for Malik's performance. And then... the closest I'll ever come to seeing a Queen concert live is watching the Live Aid sequence on a giant screen with a huge surround system. It was fantastic. It was the entire set from Live Aid minus Somebody to Love. So like 5 out of the 6 songs or 4 out of the 5 songs, 5 out of the 6 songs that they actually performed. And since they used the actual recordings, you're getting the actual music, So yeah, I mean, if you're a fan of Queen at all, check it out. I think it's totally worth it. What was the I sent you a thing earlier today about what's his name, the director of Doctor Strange?
Oh yeah. Scott Derrickson.
I was gonna say Dickinson, and I knew that wasn't right. Scott Derrickson. That he said that he really liked the film, and he didn't agree with a lot of the critical reviews because he said a lot of them were right about it not being ambitious enough or whatever else, but he said he wasn't going to take a movie to task for what he wanted it to be. He was going to judge the movie on the basis of what it was. And I think that's fair.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people have taken exception to what he said, and that's where I get a lot of the comments replying to him, attacking him for the movie moralizing and de-queering and everything like that. Although I'm given how much emphasis is on Freddy's sexuality in the film based on just what you and I have been discussing right now, I really starting to wonder if the people who were attacking it for this actually saw the movie, or if they're just basing on their assumptions. I don't know. But the thing is, I think it's fair and it's right for film critics to criticize a movie if it isn't ambitious or if it fails at certain things. I mean, that's part of film criticism. But at a certain point, you have to just rate the movie based on what the movie is, right, rather than what it could have been.
Right. Or what you wanted it to be.
Right.
Which I've seen movies and not liked them before because they weren't what I wanted them to be. But at the same time, it's like you you can't kind of go into a movie and going, oh, this is what I would have done. Oh, they didn't do that. Well, I don't like it. I mean, you can not like it, but like it is what it is, and you got to review it for what it is. But I mean, I'll buy it. I'll buy it on Blu-ray because I want to see this performance again. And I thought the last third of the movie was really, really strong and something we didn't even talk about. There's just sequences of, and this is probably not necessary for a musical biography film, but there's like a long sequence of them recording Bohemian Rhapsody that's very entertaining. There's a decently long sequence of them coming up with the cadence for the foot stomping for We Will Rock You, and it's very entertaining.
Yeah. One funny thing about this is Thursday I went out for my weekly excursion, going to get groceries and stop at the mall. And I'm with my dad, and we're driving downtown, and we're coming up to the mall, and my father just starts asking me about the movie coming out, about the guy I like, and that band I like. I go, so I go, Bohemian Rhapsody, Freddie Mercury, Queen. And so he starts asking me about that, and I said that the critics had been kind of lambasting the film, that it, with some of the issues, saying basically that it was supposed to be tame and kind of mediocre, not necessarily bad, just not really good. And my father said to me, if it's got their music, who cares? Essentially, I can't remember his exact words, but that was essentially what he said. And the thing is, as long as it's got the music of Queen in it, I'm gonna watch it.
Yeah, I mean, I picked up the soundtrack before I saw the movie. You might say, don't you have all these albums? Yeah, I do, but there's a lot of live tracks on this album that I didn't have, and it's a good collection of live tracks.
Yeah, so I want to pick up the soundtrack myself just for that reason. But yeah, I was really... This film was something I've been kind of dreading for years.
Oh yeah, we've talked about it here.
Right, and a lot of the stuff that we've been hearing about the production and the pre-production, going back to whenever it was going to star Sacha Baron Cohen, there has never been anything about this film that has made me felt at ease, and I have been apprehensive about it this entire time. But I've always maintained in the back of my mind that if it's still going to have Queen's music, I'm probably still going to see it. I mean, I've seen The Doors.
And The Doors are one of my favorite bands, and I don't really like that movie. There's too much in that movie that is so dramatically different than what actually happened that it bothers me. Right. And mind you, I said there's stuff in this movie that's different than how it happened, and it didn't bother me. There's stuff in Walk the Line that's not how it happened, and it didn't bother me. I think The Doors goes too far.
The difference is that, from what you and I have discussed, Bohemian Rhapsody just condenses stuff, which all biography films does.
Right, whereas The Doors straight up makes up stuff.
Right. And really, from my understanding, the only real reason to see The Doors is Val Kilmer's performance. But
I mean, it's a similar situation where the guy playing the lead is one of the most fascinating guys in music, and the actor playing him does a really good job doing it. I'm not going to knock Val Kilmer's performance in that. He plays a great Jim Morrison. But I don't know. I don't like. There's too much stuff in that movie that just is straight up fiction that it just bothers me to watch it. So, by the time you hear this podcast, we will probably already have done the Galactic Greg's midnight launch for Green Lantern by Grant Morrison. So hopefully you came out for that. And as of right now, raffle tickets for the production page by Doug Mahnke are still available. I don't know if they will be by the time you hear this, but there's a little over half the tickets have been sold. We are not raffling off the piece until we have 100 tickets sold, so it might not go at the midnight launch. So don't miss out on your chance to get tickets on that. If you're hearing this and you're still interested, ask us, because there's a decent chance we might not have sold all the tickets. And our main topic of the week is our top 5 favorite depictions of superheroes in live action movies. Now, despite that title, we have decided that we were going to include supervillains in this list as well. However, we have limited ourselves to movies and not just any live action portrayal.
Yeah, I'm sure eventually at some point we're probably going to do a television version of this. We could have combined it into one, but I wanted to leave us the option of doing the TV version.
Well, we also might eventually do like an animated version, because quite frankly my favorite Batman is animated, not live action. So
your favorite Batman version? It's my favorite Batman version too.
Yeah, because it's the best one, no matter what anybody says.
Yeah.
So quickly, Derek, hit me with your honorable mentions.
Okay, here's the funny thing. We immediately after we recorded last Monday, we ended up watching The Exorcist, and I started the run sheet for this week's episode, and I just dumped everything that off the top of my head on this, and I have not looked at this since. So I'm certain I'm going to be forgetting about characters in that I could have and should have included. But what I do have is honorable mentions. Beast, as played by Kelsey Grammer, because man, it amazes me that there were some people that had problems with them casting Kelsey Grammer to play the Beast in X-Men United. I'm trying to remember the name of that film. But
X-Men United is X2. You're talking about X3, which I think is The Last Stand.
Last Stand. All the abbreviations. Why couldn't we just call it X-Men 1, X-Men 2, X-Men 3? Why couldn't we just do that? Anyways, a lot of people complained about Kelsey Grammer playing Beast. I couldn't think of anyone else whose voice and cadence would have been better than Grammer. I thought it was a brilliant casting, and I think he's good in the movie. The movie, whether or not the movie's good or not, I don't know. But
his one moment in Days of Future Past is really good. So
I still have not seen that. I also have Hellboy with Ron Perlman. I have said in the past that I did have a bit of a problem with the depiction of Hellboy, that they were trying to make him too cool and kind of character who doesn't like other people, whereas that is completely not the case in the comics. But Ron Perlman as the character is just entertaining. A great actor, and he's really fun in the role, whether or not it's 100% accurate to the comics. I also put Superman as played by Henry Cavill, especially in Justice League. I think he was really good in Man of Steel and BVS, although there's problems with the tone of those films, but that has nothing to do with his performance. But then when we get to Justice League, his performance in that, he's classic Superman, and he's great. We don't get a lot of him as that version of Superman, but what we do get is phenomenal. I also put Brandon Routh as Superman because I thought he did a really great job in that movie, and incredibly underrated performance, not just as Superman but also as Clark Kent, at doing the three-way personality between Metropolis Clark, Smallville Clark, and Superman. It's really fun. I very much like the Christopher Reeve type, but he also kind of makes it a bit his own. I also put Rorschach as played by Jackie Earle Haley, who I think is just perfect casting in the Watchmen movie, and probably the best performance in that film.
He's up there, yeah.
Dr. Octopus, as played by Alfred Molina, is one of my favorite movie supervillains. He took if you really think about it, Dr. Octopus is a very one-dimensional villain in the comics,
mm-hmm.
and Alfred Molina gave him so much more depth and tragedy. I'm not a big fan of the Spider-Man movies, but that film is really, really good, and I think it's largely because of his performance.
It's my favorite Doctor Octopus up until the new Spider-Man PS4 game. And I don't like Doc Ock in most of the recent cartoon versions. So
Yeah, the stuff I've seen of Doc Ock and the Spider-Man, what is it, Ultimate Spider-Man?
yeah,
The one where he's working with S.H.I.E.L.D. and Nick Fury. Yeah, they it's like they're trying to make him more like the Joker or something, and they just go way too far off the mark. The others I have on my list are the Phantom, played by Billy Zane. I think it's a fun movie. It's not a great movie, but I really like Billy Zane's performance in the film. He's very much doing the square-jawed 1940s, 1950s classic Hollywood superhero type performance. But it's Billy Zane, so there's a little bit of a wink to it and a little bit of an edge. And I don't know. I really enjoy him in that movie, and to this day, the Phantom costume is one of my favorite movie superhero costumes because it looks almost exactly like it's from the comics. I also have Lex Luthor as played by Gene Hackman, which is just a great performance in that movie. Gene Hackman's hilarious. Gene Hackman to this day is still who I think of when I think of Lex Luthor.
it's really not for me, but his Luthor is so iconic. You know, it's not what I think of at all for the Luthor in the comic books, but
in the comics, no. But when it comes to live action, it's Gene Hackman. He's still the best, I think. In the comics, the character in the comics is very different, much more sinister, and doesn't have any of the used car salesman charm that Hackman gives him.
Right.
Last one I also have on this list is Batman, as played by Val Kilmer. This one is probably a really controversial pick. But
That's it. Podcast over. Friendship over.
Oh, you knew that Val Kilmer was my favorite Batman.
I actually I find Kilmer to be a very serviceable Batman. He's not high on my list, but there's altogether nothing wrong with his performance. So I think he gets unfairly slammed for his portrayal.
But the thing is, okay, I could see that for him as Batman. My argument is that he's the best Bruce Wayne, I think.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fair argument to make. I don't agree with it, but I totally see where you're coming from.
I just really enjoy. Okay, Batman Forever. It's not a great movie. It's way too campy, but it's still a pretty decent film, and I just really enjoy Val Kilmer in that performance, in that role, or I guess those roles. I did not add it, but I can't think of her name. The reason I didn't add her originally is because I've never read anything with the character in the comics, but just quickly checking. But she ended up being my favorite in the movie, and that is, if my computer would respond, Danae, I'm not sure how to pronounce this, and I apologize for mispronouncing it because I know I'm going to. Danae Gurira as Okoye in Black Panther.
Oh, yeah, she's really good.
She is phenomenal in that movie. I went into that movie based on the trailers expecting to really dislike the character because I thought she was just going to be like kind of the, for lack of a better term, the Michelle Rodriguez of the movie.
Right.
I'm assuming you know exactly what I mean.
No, yeah, we've talked about this before, so yeah, I totally get where you're coming from.
But she was so much more than that, and I thought she gave the most interesting performance in the movie. I loved the characterization. I don't know anything about the character from the comics, but I loved her in that film. And in Infinity War.
I think she has some of the best lines in Infinity War, and Infinity War is a movie filled with great lines.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I need to get her Pop figure, the Funko Pop. But I've never seen it anywhere. Anyways, yeah, those are my honorable mentions. I'm sure I'm forgetting a ton more, and there there are actors and performances and characters on your list I would probably have added on mine too. But I'm going to leave it at that.
Okay, my honorable mentions are Jeremy Renner as Hawkeye. Hawkeye's a character I've kind of always liked, but never cared too much about, and Renner makes you care about him.
Hawkeye, we discussed this last year. Hawkeye is a character that I have never liked in the comics, and to this day I still don't like, but I really like Jeremy Renner as Hawkeye because I think he's fun and relatable.
Yeah, he is. So, I agree with you with Gene Hackman as Lex Luthor. He just, there's something about that performance. Like, he definitely made a character that is great to watch. Surprisingly to me, Anne Hathaway's Catwoman, over time has become my favorite portrayal of Catwoman in a live-action sequence. I really like Michelle Pfeiffer's Catwoman, and I really like the various Catwomen on Batman 66, but I really, really like what they did with Catwoman in Dark Knight Rises, and I think it's the closest to how I picture her and how she normally is portrayed in more modern comics. And by modern, I mean like the late 90s to now.
I think she's closest to the post-crisis version of Catwoman.
I mean, even the Frank Miller version, which I know is post-crisis, but even the Frank Miller version, Anne Hathaway is much closer to than Michelle Pfeiffer was. Tom Hardy is Bane. Here's one of those cases where I don't care about Bane in the comics at all. Tom Hardy makes me care about Bane in that movie. Ben Affleck as Batman, I think still has the best physicality for Batman of anyone who's played the part. His fight sequences, his athletic sequences are the most Batman-like. And then, like, he plays a pretty good tortured soul throughout BVS and the beginning of Justice League.
Ben Affleck Batman is one of the ones I considered putting on mine because the version of Batman that he plays is closest in terms of physicality to the comics, because we see him doing the flipping, we see him doing the martial arts stuff, swinging from rooftop to rooftop, which is all stuff that we have never gotten in any of the Burton Schumacher movies or the Christopher Nolan films.
Right. Endlessly charming Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man, which Infinity War really brings home, because you can play him off as, he's just playing a goof, or he's just overly funny or whatever. But they give him his moments of darkness here and there, and it all ties in Infinity War when you realize how much he's been tortured since Avengers. He really has the character change and grow throughout the series.
Yeah, I have always said that Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man is very entertaining, and it's fun to watch, but he just is not playing the character I recognize from comics. I think his portrayal in Infinity War is much closer to the comics than we've seen him do in any of his previous films.
Mm-hmm.
And I really like that. It was Tony Stark in Infinity War is the closest I have that Robert Downey Jr. has been to the version of the character that I see in my head when I think of Iron Man.
Jack Nicholson is the Joker, always classic.
It's fun.
And Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman, because she's near perfect. And one that could easily have been my number 5 on the list, but just narrowly got beaten out. And I thought about changing them, and then I ended up changing them back. Hugh Jackman as Wolverine. I know there was all sorts of problems with, he doesn't look right because he's too tall and blah, 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 blah. But he really embraced that character. And over the time of doing good movies, bad movies, stupid movies, epic movies, he really embraced playing Wolverine, and he really got into the head of the character and did a really good job with it. And we see it all culminate in Logan. And if all of it, if Logan was the end point that we were trying to get to with everything else that happened, then everything else was worth it. So that's my honorable mentions, and we'll get right into Derek's number 5.
Okay, my number 5, you just mentioned her, is Wonder Woman as played by Gal Gadot. I don't know what to say about this. When Gal Gadot was first announced as being cast, there were a lot of complaints because that she was just too frail looking. Seen her in some other movies before that, like the Fast and Furious films, and she originally started as a model, and she was very tall, very, very thin. But then when BVS came out, it was just I remember being blown away by her take on the character, and we barely got much of her characterization, but just through her physicality in the role and her facial expressions, and without even lines, we really got very strong the character from the comics. That I don't know what it was, but just in a couple of moments, without even saying anything, in that film, Gal Gadot really captured Wonder Woman's compassion, and also her kind of almost her warrior spirit, and she was just complete revelation and shock. And then last year we end up with the Wonder Woman standalone film, and that just expanded so much more, and we end up with this character who is also incredibly charming, has this I don't want to say naivety, but this just
it's an earnestness.
Earnestness, and it's not that the character is simple; it's that the character is not needlessly complex, and I mean that in a good way, where she says what she thinks, and she backs up what she says. She's not someone who is duplicitous or honest with herself, or I should say dishonest. And it's just she so beautifully plays that. It's very tough. It's very easy to play the classic kind of do-gooder hero and just be wooden and play that character as essentially an idiot. We've seen that in countless movies of just the stereotypical hero with the white hat, going back to the silent era of films. But she makes a character who is simple without being stupid, non-complex without being shallow, and she also has this charm and charisma. And as I said, she also embodies this character that has. If you think about it, Wonder Woman is a very unusual character in that she is a warrior for peace,
right?
And she plays the single-minded warrior, but also the single-minded ambassador of compassion and love, equally believable. And I really love her in the role. I think we could not have gotten a better Wonder Woman. I think anyone else who would have been cast would have probably have been too corny, or played the role too violent, or maybe come off as a female Wolverine type. And Gal just perfectly blends both sides of this strange coin of a character. So yeah, she's my number 5. I think I might have just talked her up into being higher up on my list. I feel weird that she's only number 5.
I feel weird she's not in my top 5 because she's very good. But making this list was I realized how many great performances we've actually gotten that are worth mentioning here.
Yeah, it always surprises me that whenever I stop and think about it, because I tend to forget about Wonder Woman. But whenever I actually start to think about it, and this was the same thing that happened whenever we did our top 5 favorite superheroes last year, is that when I stop and think about it, Wonder Woman is a character that really, truly does mean a lot to me, and I completely adore. Although it's just, it sounds weird to say this, but she's just not as flashy as some of the other characters, and you kind of forget she's there at times, which is weird. I don't know why that is.
Right.
But yeah, talk about the MCU and when we talk about, okay, with the MCU, the most valuable player is Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man, without a doubt. because he's the one that cemented the MCU, and he's most people's number one. Gal is definitely the cornerstone of the DC films that we have been getting for the last few years. And I don't think anyone would have expected that. But she's just great. She's a great ambassador for the character.
Yeah, absolutely. And I loved her in her movie, and I will argue anybody who says that she barely does anything in BVS or doesn't have an important enough role in Justice League, because I think she's just as good in both of those movies.
She's just to reiterate what I was saying earlier, the power of her performance is that she says volumes and does so much with minimal effort in her performance. It's an incredible performance and characterization. Yeah, and her in BVS, she's fantastic in that. She's fantastic in Justice League. I don't understand people who think that she doesn't do anything in that movie. She does a lot. She's integral to forming the team. She's the reason why Cyborg decides to eventually embrace his humanity. And then she's the one who ultimately defeats the bad guy. Or at least she gets the final blow. I don't know, it's crazy.
So my number 5 is Tom Holland as Spider-Man. Now, I really like Tobey Maguire as Spider-Man, and I probably give Andrew Garfield a harder time than he deserves, because he does do some decent stuff in Spider-Man, Amazing Spider-Man 2. I just don't like him kind of being a jock, because it's kind of anti-everything Spider-Man's about.
I think there are definite problems with Andrew Garfield's portrayal in the first Amazing Spider-Man, but I think he's pretty much spot on in Amazing Spider-Man 2.
But Holland wins this based on them finally giving us a Spider-Man in his mid-teens rather than late teens, early 20s. Granted, that's a valid version of the character. Spider-Man has been for the most of the past 30 to 40 years in the comics been a character in his late teens to mid-20s, even up to 30. He was only ever a teenager at the very beginning, but it's such an interesting time period for the character. And we get a glimpse of this in Civil War when Holland first comes in, and he's got like the great moment about that really old movie called Empire Strikes Back, and just playing him up as a kid who's been given these powers and is in the middle of doing all this stuff. But then he just knocks it out of the park in Homecoming. He is so believable. He's just just everything about his performance is great. And then he almost one-ups himself in Infinity War, because I think everybody almost one-ups themselves in Infinity War, because it was just that kind of movie. So Holland gives us like the perfect teenage Spider-Man with a nice modern take on the character, as far as his, Spider-Man's always been smart, but he definitely has a tech savviness with modern tech in those movies. He kind of interacts with the suit as if the way a lot of kids interact with their mobile devices, and he's super charming. So, and he plays sort of a smart, dumb kid, almost like what we were talking about last week with Linus, where he's smart, but at the same time he's like he doesn't get a lot of things, because he's sort of either been naive or sheltered or not worldly enough.
He's not savvy.
No, yeah, not at all. That's perfect way to put it.
Tom Holland is great in this role. Tobey Maguire was fun. I did not. Garfield in Amazing Spider-Man 1 was a bit too much of. He almost came off like a bully.
Yeah, I've made that statement several times. He's angry. It causes him to be bullyish, and a lot of his stuff that's supposed to be funny comes off as really overbearing and mean.
Right. Whereas in Amazing Spider-Man 2, I don't know what they changed, but all of a sudden he was very much what I would have thought of if you asked me what Spider-Man is, because I think he's great in that movie, and that probably would have been my favorite portrayal of Spider-Man in live action, if it was not immediately followed by Tom Holland in Civil War, and then Homecoming and Infinity War. He really fully embodies everything that was great and fun about Spider-Man as this teen hero.
Right. Like Maguire, I like Maguire's performance quite a bit, but he does not, he never gets to the level of being the funny quipster. He plays every other aspect of the character very well, but he never quite is the funny quipster. And Tom Holland totally pulls off he never shuts up in a fight, because he's making nervous jokes. He totally they actually have Falcon call it out in Civil War. I don't know if you've ever been in a fight before, but there's usually not this much talking.
Yeah, no, he's great. It's that Maguire and Garfield in certain films that they did were mostly correct to the character, but there was just lacking in one area. Tom Holland is not lacking his performance in any area. He is 100% the character, and it has been a joy to watch. I'm trying to think of the best way I could put it is, until I saw Civil War, I was never excited about an upcoming Spider-Man film. But then whenever Homecoming got announced, I actually really wanted to see a Spider-Man movie. And then I'm really looking forward to his next film, because he is so much fun in the role and all these films. Yeah, he's not. This is another case of a character that's on your list I easily could have put in my honorable mentions.
Mm-hmm.
Frankly, I probably should have.
Okay, so who is your number 4?
Right now, I'm starting to think that he should have been number 5. But my number 4 is Thor, as played by Chris Hemsworth. And, oh gosh, you want to talk about a character evolving over a series of films? Thor does. I don't know. It kind of seems like a lot of people get surprised whenever I tell them that one of my 5 favorite Marvel films is still the original Thor. I just really liked the character progression in that movie, where you have Thor as this brash, hot-headed, obnoxious jerk who we still got a few moments here and there to show that he's not that bad, and he's good to his friends, and he can learn to be a little bit better. But then by the progression of that film is him being humbled and finally becoming a true hero by the end of that movie, and he completely, totally does. And then we end up with the Avengers movies, and Thor: The Dark World, which really expanded the idea of Thor as this noble hero who, he's a bit brash and still, but not to the level that he was, but a bit brash. And I really loved how in Avengers: Age of Ultron we got that scene where he's just spouting off, and he's doing like all this grand proclamations and stuff like that, and then midway through it he stops himself and says, "I'm running out of things to say."
Yeah.
And but one of the things that's great about the character is that they cast Chris Hemsworth, who, in addition to being an incredibly good-looking guy, is capable at doing dramatic performance in that, is really, really funny. And we would get moments of his comedy, not very much, but moments in the Avengers films and the Thor movies, up until we got Thor Ragnarok. Now, I think there's a problem with Thor Ragnarok where I believe the direction overemphasizes the comedy to a detrimental degree, where it kind of ruins the really dramatic and emotional, what should be the dramatic and emotional moments in that film.
Mm-hmm.
But Chris Hemsworth really, really makes Thor, if Thor was not his character before, it really becomes his character in that film, where he just starts it's a tour de force of a comedic performance, in addition to still being the grand, great, epic hero that the character is from the comics. And we do get we get moments where Thor looks like an idiot, but we also get moments where Thor looks like a living, breathing god, and that end up progressing into Infinity War, where they still have a lot of the humor that was in Ragnarok, but they temper it with the character as being that, you know, giving him so much more depth with how much destruction and death that he's witnessed and the loss of friends. And so his humor in Infinity War is much more almost gallows humor. And there's a sadness behind it. But he's still doing the grandiose proclamations and, you know, exaggerated boasting and that, which characters like the Guardians are commenting on, you know, as if he's an idiot. But us, the viewers, having been through the progression with the character, know that everything he's saying is, you know, it's a joke. He's not taking it seriously. And I just think it's a brilliant performance. Chris Hemsworth just keeps making the character of Thor so much more complex with each film, and he is one of my favorite things in the MCU and modern superhero movies. I don't know, but maybe it's really tough for me to judge between Gal Gadot's Wonder Woman and Chris Hemsworth's Thor, but I don't know. I just kind of give Hemsworth the edge because we've seen so much more of the character and we've lived with the character and his portrayal of the character so much longer. And Thor was a character that I always liked in the comics. Chris Hemsworth made me love Thor.
Yeah, I agree with just about everything you said. I also am not super high on Ragnarok because of I don't think a lot of the comedy works, or at least it doesn't work for me. However, I'm appreciative of the fact that Thor in Infinity War is probably my favorite performance by Hemsworth as Thor, and I don't think you get there without Ragnarok.
Oh yeah. It is definitely my favorite Hemsworth Thor performance, and it would be impossible for him to give that performance if we did not have Ragnarok first. Oh my god, I really want to watch Infinity War now.
Well, I kind of always want to watch Infinity War, so.
Yeah, that movie just gives us, the character of Thor in the comics, for decades I've been hearing, Thor is Marvel's Superman. He's on par with Superman. And I've never believed that because Thor in the comics has never really done anything that really matches Superman's feats. And then in Infinity War, we get so many of them where he is a god, and it's just so awesome. And you can see him being awe-inspiring and people just worshiping the character in ancient times. Oh man, I really want to watch that movie now. I want to watch it right after we finish recording.
So my number 4 is Batman, as played by Michael Keaton. I suppose more in the first movie than the second movie, but they're both pretty solid. So I know there's some problems here with a lot of people saying, oh, they cast a comedian to play Batman and everything. I think he proved everyone wrong. The character is not 100% to the comic. There's, him using... It still amazes me everyone complained about Batman using lethal force in BVS when he routinely did throughout the Burton Schumacher films. And there's, it's only really Dark Knight that gets that 100% right. But you don't get to most of my comic fandom or my love of Batman without this performance, so I had to rate it in here. I think Keaton's a good Bruce Wayne. I think he's a good Batman. I like, I'm sure most of it's stunt doubles, but I like a lot of the fight scenes in the first movie. Especially the one up in the bell tower where he's fighting the one goon. I think it's great.
The bell tower stuff is just phenomenal. That is really, really good. I had forgotten how good it was until we rewatched it earlier this year. Sorry about that.
No, that's fine. There's a reason that movie was a phenomenon.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, a lot of the credit goes to Nicholson as the Joker, who was really good. But just like Hackman as Luthor, The guy on the other side staring down the villain has to be at least halfway decent, otherwise it doesn't work. And this worked. So yeah, he's on the slightly on the short side with curly hair and not a square jaw, but he is a really really good Batman. Again, more in the first movie than the second movie. I've said before that the first movie is a great Batman film and the second movie is a great Tim Burton film.
Yeah, that's always been the one knock I had for the Batman Returns, is that Burton essentially Burton made a Batman movie with the '89 Batman, but whenever it came time to do Returns, Tim Burton just made a Tim Burton movie that just happens to have Batman in it. And part of the problem with that movie is that Batman, in and of himself, is a fascinating, interesting character, but he's completely overshadowed by everyone else in that movie.
Right.
And I think Burton just wasn't interested in the character at that point.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably a fair argument. I've never read anything to contradict that. He was definitely having fun with the body horror of Penguin in that movie more than anything else, and then the psychological horror of Catwoman. So that's much more what he's focused on. It's still a really solid film.
Oh, it is.
I still watch it every year. It's on my
just,
Christmas movie list. So
it's just a really weird movie when you think about it, because it's so much more fantasy and supernatural stuff thrown into it, and as you said, a lot more body horror, but it's also much more campier. It's really where that movie is basically what ended up making the Schumacher films possible and believable as a continuation, because the increasing campiness as that series went on. But yeah, Keaton's still really good and solid in the film. The only problem is he doesn't get as much to do as he did in the original.
Right. I can make the argument that it's very hard to see Batman Returns as a direct sequel to Batman. Like, the world has changed significantly in between the two movies, because the setting is much more cartoony.
One of my problems I have with film portrayals of Batman is that people, a lot of the actors and the directors tend to, I think at times, overdo the isolation and trauma of Bruce Wayne, so we don't get a really in-depth characterization. I think that was a real big problem with the Nolan films, and it's something that's very much in BVS. And this is one of the reasons why I really like Val Kilmer as Bruce Wayne in Batman Forever, because his characterization as Bruce Wayne is much more, I think, a little more balanced. But we actually get moments of kind of an honest levity to Bruce Wayne, in their throwaway moments in the '89 Batman, like whenever he gets all of a sudden I can't pronounce it. The soup. The cold soup.
Oh, that's the second movie, I think.
Are you sure? I swear it was the first.
It's vichyssoise, sir. It's supposed to be cold. But even like, I like how he plays the flippant the flippant Bruce Wayne in the first movie, where it's like, oh, and give Knox a grant, where he's just a rich eccentric guy doing stuff.
Yeah, no, it's just. But my point with the soup is that I like those little moments, because we get the little moments where Bruce seems much more human, rather than just like the analytical guy squinting at the rack of computer screens. And Michael Keaton really, really plays those moments well. It's Michael Keaton; he's good in everything.
That is true.
So yeah, I do really like Michael Keaton as Batman and Bruce Wayne. I think he's very good in performance.
Yeah, part of the problem I have with Batman Forever, and it's not Kilmer's fault, because I do think Kilmer plays a good Batman in that film, is by the end of the film, like, sort of the idea that this is Batman, and he's gotten over the death of his parents.
Oh, that was flat out stated for Batman and Robin, where you had George Clooney based on the direction of that, George Clooney said that in interviews. Well, I'm playing Batman after he's gotten over the death of his parents.
but he says it. He says it in Batman Forever. He says, "I'm Batman now, not because I have to be, but because I choose to be."
The thing is, I don't have a problem with that.
I don't have a problem with him choosing to be Batman. I have a problem with him getting over the death of his parents because it's sort of this defining characteristic.
Right.
I mean,
but the thing is, I don't think he's explicitly stating that in Batman Forever.
It feels like he is. Okay, maybe it's because I've heard Schumacher say, "I'm making a Batman film where he doesn't care about his parents." So maybe that's attributing to it. Because I kind of feel like Adam West is over the death of his parents is the wrong word, really. It's Adam West plays a Batman who has come to terms with the death of his parents. And even at times Keaton and definitely Conroy in the animated series, he's come to terms with the death of his parents, but he's also come to terms with the fact that he is now Batman, and this is something he has to continue doing, as opposed to the Nolan Batman, who is really looking for every opportunity to not be Batman anymore.
Right. If you really want to discuss it or get to it, the Nolan Batman is a very iconic classic Batman. It is not the classic Batman at all.
Yeah, that's right.
That very reason.
I've heard Dark Knight Rises knocked for him not having been Batman for 8 years. Oh, Batman wouldn't give up. He wouldn't stop being Batman. Did you watch the first movie? Did you watch the first movie or the second movie where his whole thing is, I'm going to do this as long as I have to, and then let someone take over? He's trying to get Harvey to take his place and everything else, and not take his place as Batman, but make it so that Batman's not needed anymore, so that he can go marry Rachel and have the life that he wants.
Yeah, my thing is the Val Kilmer's line at the end of Batman Forever. I think that's what they were trying to get across, that he's come to terms with it and he chooses to be Batman. And to me, that's the kind of Batman I want. This is the kind of Batman I've always wanted and I've always liked. That was the kind of Batman that was the character I used to love reading in the 70s and 80s comics, or I should say early 80s comics. The kind of Batman that Adam West portrayed, or that was portrayed on Super Friends. It was a guy who didn't have to do this, but he continues to do it because it's the right thing to do.
No, yeah, I'm totally fine with that. Like I said, to me, this argument is tainted by the fact that I've heard Schumacher say, basically, he just didn't want to have to deal with the parents at all, so he just said, we're done with that.
The thing is, I think that was kind of you can kind of look at it that way for the progression of the Michael Keaton Batman, because the death of his parents is all over the 89 film. And I think that the defeat of the Joker and Jack at the end of Batman 89 basically is the defining moment that lets him finally put his parents to rest. And then Batman Returns is basically he's now just Batman because he chooses to be. I think you could make that argument for that.
Yeah, I also always say that the Lego Batman movie starts off with the dark brooding, parent-obsessed Batman, and ends up with the more Silver Age, surrounded by family, doing it because it's right Batman. I think there's a good argument to be made that the Lego Batman movie is telling people that obsess over the dark brooding Batman that there's another version of Batman that they should enjoy. Mm-hmm. By having the character be both versions of the character throughout the movie and progressing from one to the other. So who's your number 3, Derek?
My number 3? It's funny. My 3, 4, and 5 could, any given day, I probably would have switched the order, but the 3 I went with is Black Widow, as played by Scarlett Johansson. And honestly, if I start to actually think about it, the more comfortable I get with this decision, or the order I have, these 3 characters, Wonder Woman, Thor, and Black Widow. I almost said Scarlet Widow. Oh, I should write that down and use that name. Black Widow is a character that was actually one of my favorite comic book characters I mean, like, top 3 favorite superheroes back, or at least top 5, back when I was in high school. I was a huge fan of the character, and that was basically just from, like, her doing, at the time, having occasional appearances in other titles, and being in Avengers and the annual big Marvel crossovers. But then, after I got out of high school, my interest and affection for the character kind of waned because I just wasn't exposed to her that much over time. And quite frankly, I think Black Widow kind of disappeared for a little bit in the comics.
Well, the Yelena Belova version of Black Widow was more prominent in that period.
Right. And the funny thing is, and what makes this choice funny to me is whenever Black Widow and Scarlett Johansson debuted in Iron Man 2, I was utterly disappointed. I did not have a problem with Johansson in the role, but I thought the character was underwritten and served no real point in the film, and easily could have just been removed and none of the plot would have changed. Frankly, I didn't understand why they had the character in there, because it was already an overstuffed film. But then I saw Avengers 1, and I just instantly loved Johansson and her take on the character in that film. I absolutely loved the character in that movie, and I've loved the character in every portrayal she's done since, whether it's in Captain America Winter Soldier, then Avengers Age of Ultron, followed by Captain America Civil War, into Avengers Infinity War. And I'm really not sure how to explain it or where to start. The thing I like, but what I like about the character is that over time we get the deeper and deeper into the history of the character without actually getting the full history. But we get so much hint at such a traumatic background and past that the character has. And the thing I really like about the characterization, and a lot of people have complained about certain aspects of her tragic background. The thing I love about the character and her portrayal is that she's a person who has had incredible trauma and traumatic situations, and she's not traumatized by it. I'm not. That isn't to say she's not affected by it, but I think for the most part, she's a character that basically uses it as fuel for everything she does. I also like how over the course of the Captain America films, we get to see her, and the Avengers films, we get to see her in different roles. The dedicated spy and soldier, the special agent, secret agent, and we get elements of potential for romantic relationships, which are played really nicely, and kind of a sweetness to the performances. Much more of an adult take on the potential for a relationship with Bruce Banner in Age of Ultron. But while all that goes on in those movies, we also get a lot of the color and personality and of the character in the Captain America films, where we get this great relationship between Natasha and Steve, where they're completely believable, becoming really close, good friends. And I think the Avengers movies tend to kind of downplay, or if not outright ignore that. But it's something that I've really enjoyed watching over the course of the Captain America movies. And to the point where Natasha, Black Widow in the MCU, is a character. If I had to choose any character from the MCU that I would want as my best friend, it would be Black Widow. She seems like fiercely loyal, fiercely protective, but also really funny, and I like her sense of humor in the movies, and I just find her really fun to watch.
Yeah, so I kind of this is the one you have that I agree with the least. I do like her in Iron Man 2. I pretty much don't like anything she does in the first Avengers movie or the second Avengers movie. However, I think she's really strong in both of the Captain America movies she's in, which altogether makes her feel like a schizophrenic character to me. Because I like her in one movie and not in the next. It's when the Russo brothers continue on into Infinity War, then we're finally to the point where she's consistently being portrayed the way I think I like her, and that's Winter Soldier, Civil War, Infinity War. But I really don't like her in Avengers, and she's just kind of there in Age of Ultron.
I, I, I don't know. I thought the scenes that she had with Bruce Banner in Age of Ultron were very good. She doesn't have a huge role in the story, but I thought it was a very interesting adult take on a relationship. It's not Hollywoodized.
No, I get your argument there, and I do agree with that. It's the I don't like her bluffing Loki. I don't like anyone bluffing Loki for that matter. And the ending battle sequence, I feel like she just really doesn't do anything, even though they kind of make her the focal point of getting everything done. I do
Yeah.
like the little bit of stuff with her and Clint, especially after Clint comes to. And I do like the stuff with her and Banner at the beginning. I like her more in Age of Ultron because of the relationship with her and Banner. It makes sense what they did with her,
Mhm.
but
I've always been aware that of your opinion of her in Avengers, but I've never really understood it because I've always thought that her action scenes in the final act of the film were phenomenal. She looks great and badass, jumping around, flipping around. She's shooting, and she's martial arts, karate chopping everyone. And I love the one beat where Captain America shows up, asks her how she's doing, and she just kind of like I don't even know how to describe the reaction she does, but she's got the blood coming down from her forehead. She just took out a couple of the aliens, and she's kind of like almost like a shrug, and it's just a little beat that I just really like. And then they do the whole business with her because someone has to catch one of these flying skiffs and that, and Cap's saying, "You ready for this?" And she says, "Sure, it's gonna be fun." I just like the little moments in that scene, and then she does the really cool flip up onto the thing and takes out the guys on that, and then the final stuff with her getting into the top of the tower, and she's really the one who stops, closes and stops the invasion. So I think she does affect a lot of the story in that movie. It almost seems like your argument for her in that is my argument for her in Iron Man 2, but I think she directly does and accomplishes several things in the first Avengers.
she has good action moments. I just don't think she has a lot. She has a few, but I don't think she has a lot of good character moments in Avengers 1. I think her strongest character moment is her introduction in that movie. But
Oh yeah, well, I would say that her strongest moments in the first Avengers movie are definitely her introduction, where she's being quote unquote interrogated, even though she's the one doing the interrogation. Which great written scene. I think her first meeting of Banner was in India.
yes,
It's a really charged, really good scene, and then her interaction with Hawkeye when he's finally coming to. I think those are very, very good moments. I wanted to actually briefly mention her bluffing Loki. I get your point. Her tricking the trickster is kind of silly, but I don't think it plays that bad, because up to that point, we're shown that she does this routinely. This is part of her MO when dealing with her, the spy stuff that she does. I think it was already set up. It does bring up one thing I wanted to briefly mention. After that movie came out, and for years I still see people talk about it online, people seem to really love that Black Widow says love is for children. That, essentially love doesn't exist. It's just something for children. But people never seem to take it within the context of when she says that in the movie, and that is when she's trying to bluff Loki. They take it at face value in a scene where nothing she says should be taken at face value. It's just, I just wanted to make that point. But no, I don't get it. Scarlett Johansson made me love Black Widow again, and she does this incredible job of playing the world-weary spy. If anything, actually, she reminds me a lot of what I was saying back when we were talking about movie characters in the summer with regards to Timothy Dalton's James Bond. He's a guy who is really world-weary, who's tired of the spy business, but keeps doing it because it's what he knows. And his humor is a defense mechanism, but there's still this heart to him that he will not admit to anyone, not even to himself. And I think everything I just said applies to Natasha in the MCU. She's a badass. She's funny. She's the fighter I would want in the foxhole with me. And it's just funny to me that she's the character that can bluff the trickster god, but she's always basically trying to bluff herself, and she's never successful at it.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that movie does well is gives every character in the cast something to do. This was talked about a lot when the movie first came out, that almost every Avenger has the exact same screen time. Mm-hmm. It's just they also were trying to give everyone one big moment, and I think she suffers from having not a very good big moment, because I just feel like anyone lying and getting one over on Loki, it would be like someone out wrestling or out lifting Hercules or something, like someone out besting the god of strength in a strength feat. Right. It's just, he's the god of lies. No one should be able to lie to him.
I don't know. I think if anything, it just I would make the argument that Loki bluffed himself at that point, because he was so certain of his victory in that he basically got stupid. I think he just got careless. And well, I think we consistently see in that film that, and in the rest of the films going after that, Natasha is very good at playing sides and tricking and fooling people and bluffing, because that is what she does basically through the entirety of Civil War.
I don't have a problem with that. Yes, she is a spy. She should be good at bluffing. I'm just saying bluffing the god of lies is something else entirely.
Right.
I mean, that's another problem I have with Avengers is I think a lot of that movie depends on contrivances. And one of those contrivances is Loki kind of being incompetent.
Oh, there are a lot of contrivances in that movie. How about the fact that the heroes they're transporting Loki. The heroes end up fighting amongst themselves. Thor tries to use lethal force against Captain America, who he has just met, but no one ever says anything about that. He tried to kill him with the hammer.
Oh yeah, no,
And then this was perfectly played in how it should have ended, where the scene ends and Loki's just there. He didn't try to run away, and no one questions that in the movie.
Right. No, yeah, I mean, I like that movie a lot for a lot of reasons. Its story is not one of those reasons.
Right.
I think it's I've described that movie in the past as a series of events that a little kid with their Marvel action figures went, and then this cool thing happens, and then this cool thing happens, but there's not really a story tying those cool things together.
I don't think you're wrong, but it does not affect my enjoyment of the movie. And
no,
Avengers
I still really enjoy that movie.
Right.
However, I would probably enjoy that movie a lot more than I do if that problem was solved. And
Right.
I'm going to come back to it. I'm going to say it again. You know what movie solves those problems? Infinity War.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm just saying, I completely recognize the plot contrivances that are in the original Avengers, but it's still one of my 5 favorite MCU films.
I think it's just outside of my top 5, so.
I really enjoy it, and I don't have a problem with Black Widow at all in that movie. In fact, she is arguably my favorite thing in that movie, or at least she would be, except for my number 2 pick is in the movie as well. But I'm not going to get into that right now. But yeah, Scarlett Johansson, Black Widow is my number 3, and it's hard for me to explain, but I just really love her in this role. But we should probably move on and get to your number 3.
My number 3, and we kind of did a whole podcast about it already, is Heath Ledger as the Joker. Now, granted, not your traditional comic book take on the Joker. Completely understand that. However, super interesting take on the Joker. Totally viable take on the Joker. Truth be told, not my definitive version of the Joker by any means, because the more traditional comic book version is what I would prefer. However, in the context of the Nolan Batman universe and the way they decided to portray this character, Ledger could not be better. He knocks it out of the park. We talked about, when we did our Dark Knight review, how it's basically his movie.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, without question. His shadow is all over the entirety of that film.
Right. He drives most of the plot of that film. Like, his actions drive most of what happens to everybody.
What's great about the movie is when we get to the parts of the film where you start to think that Batman is now driving the plot, you find out, no, he isn't.
Right.
Joker planned all this. He's still the guy in the pilot seat.
Right. No, yeah, absolutely. Even to the point after he's been captured and sent to Arkham Asylum, like everything that's still happening and still in play is because of something that he put into motion. So yeah, just interesting appearance, which we understand that Ledger came up with his own makeup for this, and then his body language, his vocal tics, his accent, all of this stuff is stuff that's coming out of Ledger. You know, the flat Midwestern accent, slightly Chicago accent, the constant clicking of his tongue, the just like I said, the way he carries himself, so his body language and everything. Like he created a character here. You know, it is very hard. It is very hard to watch that movie and recognize Ledger at any time.
Oh, it's this weird dichotomy where the character is singularly Heath Ledger, but Heath Ledger himself is not recognizable at all in that character. It's incredible. It's one of the great performances of the last 25 years in film history. It's just, yeah, he just really commands that movie.
I mean, and something he does, and let's be fair, Mark Hamill does the same thing as the Joker, but something that really good actors do is normal people, when normal people talk, they have a range about their voice. Sometimes it's lower, sometimes it's higher, depending on their emotions and everything else. He doesn't have, his Joker voice isn't just a flat Joker voice that he's doing the whole movie. He has that range of voice like a real person would have, where sometimes it's up and sometimes it's down, and you know, just slightly different speech patterns. Whatever. Like I said, Hamill kind of does the same thing, because Hamill has moments where he's almost Cesar Romero, where he's really high, and then he has moments where he gets like growly, you know. And his regular Joker voice is somewhere in between, you know.
Right. The perfect example is the one impression that you always do that I just love.
Oh,
I
yeah.
love
Don't touch me, old man. I don't know where you've been.
It always abuses me.
Yeah, he goes from one extreme to the other, neither of which are his regular speaking voice throughout the film, you know. But yeah, Ledger does the same thing with growling at one point, and you know, and the squealing laughter at some points, and yeah, he has a complete vocal range, and you don't see that. I mean, you do, but you don't see it from a lot of actors without it being just their normal voice. Like, you and I have that about our voices, and if I'm going to play a character and I'm using my own voice for that character, I'm going to use my own vocal range. But he came up with his entirely own vocal range for that only the Joker possesses, not that is Heath Ledger's normal vocal range.
Right. It is such an incredible performance.
Yeah, like I said, it's hard for me to say anything more because we did a whole podcast about it. Go back and listen to our 10th anniversary of Dark Knight podcast, and we really get into Ledger's performance. But
my problem with discussing this right now is that I don't want to accidentally repeat stuff I've already said. So that's why I'm kind of not really saying as much.
Yeah, understandable.
Because we talked for like an hour about it, about it back in the summer.
Right. No, yeah, I completely get it. So we'll move on. Now, before we move on, I'm going to point out that our number 2 and our number 1, we both have the same 2 characters. From this point on, it's just discussing our number 2 and our number 1. So what is our number 2, Derek?
Okay, my number 2 and Matt's number 2 is Captain America as played by Chris Evans. Man, oh man.
How worried were we when Chris Evans was cast as Captain America?
I was something bricks. I had seen Chris Evans in several movies before, and I thought he was a good actor. I thought he was really funny. But the problem is, I thought he was horribly miscast when they made the announcement. The reason is that basically everything I had seen Evans in, he played an obnoxious and cocky jerk.
He plays frat boy types. A lot of movies he played frat boy types.
Right. And I just kept thinking, oh my God, that is a terrible choice for Captain America. They are going. I was terrified we were gonna end up with a Captain America that was gonna be like the Mark Millar Ultimates Captain America, where he's just the jarhead jerk who follows orders blindly and has no real moral center, or that we were gonna end up with again basically the same type, jarhead jerk with no real moral center, John Walker, U.S. agent. I thought we were going to end up with something like that, or just Captain America as a frat boy jerk, and we did not get that at all. Oh my God, we did not. Man, I have to give all the props to Chris Evans because he gave a performance. He basically he was and is the character from the comics that I love. And I never would have thought that he could have pulled it off, and he pulled it off in spades.
Yeah, he very much completely embodied the character to the point that I feel like he's given us the definitive version of the character in film.
No, without question. I mean, who else even comes close to comparing? We've had a few other live-action versions of Captain America, but none of them had any impact at all. And I don't know how the heck you follow up Chris Evans with someone taking over the role. Because eventually the character is going to be rebooted, and we're going to have... I don't know if it's going to be 5 years, I don't know if it's going to be in 15, or if it's going to be 20. At some point, the character's going to get a reboot, and we're going to have new Steve Rogers becoming Captain America film. And I don't know if it's possible to anyone to come close to being the character that Evans has been embodying for, 7 years now?
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy when you think about it. that it's only been 7 years, and in that time, he's done 3 Avengers movies and 3 Captain America movies.
Oh, thanks to the way that these MCU films are made, we have guys playing, and even in the DCU films, we have guys playing characters. Like Affleck has played Batman in 4 different movies. Gal Gadot has played Wonder Woman in 3 different movies. Tom Holland has already been Spider-Man in 3 different movies. You know, like they're lapping the actors from the previous generation of superhero movies, like Maguire and Garfield. They're lapping them easily because they're coming in for these like supporting roles in other people's movies.
Right.
You know,
Gal Gadot played Wonder Woman in 3 movies in the span of 1 year, because she's in BVS at the beginning of the summer 2016, and then she's a year later she's in Wonder Woman, and then a few months after that, Justice League. Okay, so yeah, not the span of 1 year, but a year and a half. She's in 3 films in major roles. Yeah, what we've been seeing the last decade with superhero movies was unheard of. But yeah, Chris Evans, Captain America, he had me from the very first moment that we saw him in Avengers, Captain America: The First Avenger.
Oh yeah. I mean, do better than that. Like when we first started seeing the trailers and we saw him as Skinny Steve, it was like, oh wow, what did they do here? You know. And then when we get like him getting beat up as Skinny Steve, but not backing down from anybody before he ever has powers or anything, it's like, okay, they're doing this right. You know.
Yeah.
And you even get things like I think there are subtleties to his performance that he doesn't get enough credit for. I've always really liked in First Avenger when after he gets his powers and chases down the Nazi spy, that like he can't control his body. You know, like he's slightly clumsy because it's like he doesn't know how to pilot this new rig that he's in. You know, and some of it's more blatant, like with him falling through the window or whatever. But a lot of it's like in his own footing and whatnot. So it's the way Evans plays it.
Right, and it's not just that, but it's also that he's shocked at his ability to do these things as well.
Right.
And all this is going on at the exact same time. What I would say with Chris Evans as Captain America is kind of similar to what I was saying about Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman, and I'm probably going to end up saying this with our number 1 pick, and that is that Evans as Captain America is a character who is uncomplicated. He's simple without being stupid. He's the earnestness, and it's the same principle of Gal Gadot's Wonder Woman, where it's what he says. He does what he says, and he means what he says.
Right.
There's no falsehood in anything he does, and Evan's portrayal of the character, he never once betrays the character. Everything he does is in character, and it's just so wonderfully done.
Yeah, and this is something I do like quite a bit in the Avengers film, and we get it started there and it continues throughout his course as the character. Is he kind of is a, let's say, I don't want to say narrow-minded, but he's definitely a single-minded. Like, he has his morality, and it's what he believes in. But we start seeing, like, when he starts coming into conflict with Tony Stark in the first Avengers movie, that he is 100% willing to defend his point of view. You know, like, he believes in a certain type of rightness, and he's willing to argue it.
Right. This is a character who, you might say he's too stubborn for his own good.
At times.
I would say that Evan's version of Cap still does have some faults, and that's probably one of them, because everything that makes him good as Captain America and everything that makes his Captain America perfect as Captain America can be taken too far at times. And I think that's most evident in Civil War. The idea that instead of just sitting down and having a calm collected, rational conversation with Tony Stark, they just end up automatically arguing, and neither one gives up or gives any ground, and they can't even communicate. And this is like in the beginning of the movie.
Right.
But the thing that makes him as Steve Rogers so great is that he can recognize his faults and admit them whenever he does it, which is why we end up getting the letter at the end where he sends the package with the phone and the letter to Tony.
Right.
In which he says that he realized that he thought that he was sparing Tony hurt and harm by not telling him the truth about what happened to Tony's parents, but then he admitting that he realized that he was just sparing himself the difficulty of telling him.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a character that is simple but is not lacking in depth. And man, Chris Evans defied every expectation I had.
Well, like one of the things he has going on, and this is evident in Civil War as well, is he kind of like say in Civil War, for the most part, I would say he is right. However, his fault in Civil War is that he can't even accept that anyone would possibly disagree with him on this, because he to himself, he is so clearly right about it.
Right.
And that's what leads to a lot of the conflict, but
right.
I mean, that's not to say that Tony Stark isn't completely stubborn about his point of view. However, Tony Stark's point of view is more of, I feel more of I've messed up and I don't trust myself to put myself back in check, so I'm going to agree to this so that someone else puts me back in check.
I think the problem with Tony is that Tony is carrying a lot of guilt, but he cannot admit that his own culpability, not even to himself. That everything that happened, most of the stuff that was problems, in which the reason for the Accords was, you could say it's because Tony Stark is Tony Stark, and he's the one who caused a lot of the problems, because Tony Stark doesn't listen to anyone. But his argument is basically that we need to be stopped based on what he himself had done.
Right.
But he can't admit that to himself, that's what he's saying. The issue with Steve is that I personally think Steve's correct in the argument, but the problem is he can't even understand or see the point of view that could lead someone to be on the other side. So he doesn't even have he's incapable of preparing a counter argument other than just bulldozing on, because he can't counter their points. And he never does attempt to counter their points. He never points out that a large part of the problems that for the whole thing with the Accords was because it was Tony Stark doing whatever Tony Stark wanted to do. That point never gets brought up. He never even brings up the point that Tony has been violating the Accords the entire rest of the movie. Whenever they have their confrontation,
mm-hmm.
Tony signed the Accords and then immediately went about violating it for the rest of the film, even though he's arguing that they need the Accords and because someone needs to rein him in, because Tony can't rein in Tony. I mean, he brought a 15-year-old kid.
He took a 15-year-old kid across international lines, including an ocean, without the permission of their guardian, and put them into a war zone.
Oh gosh, no one makes that argument. No one points that out. It is incredible. I'm amazed Rhodey doesn't actually even point that out.
Well, I think Rhodey is surprised when Rhodey makes the comment about, Jesus, Tony, how young is this kid? I think that's when Rhodey starts figuring it out. He's like, he literally thought they had a Spider-Man with them, and he probably assumed Tony got him to sign the Accords, and everything was legal and above board.
It's amazing.
Which again shows that Tony Stark needs to be saved from himself.
The entirety of the Accords should have been putting Tony under the watch and eye of someone as a guardian, someone who could actually control because we know it's not. We know he can't control himself, and we know Piper can't control him.
I mean, you could almost boil it down the Accords and the conflict in Civil War to be Tony thinks, oh, I messed up, I need someone to put me in check, and Cap thinks, that's ridiculous, why wouldn't you just put yourself in check? Like, Cap doesn't understand why Tony can't put himself in check, so
yeah,
you know, because that's what Cap's whole argument is I don't want anyone else telling us what we can do, we should be able to handle it ourselves. And then he looks good in a uniform. He looks good in a blue uniform.
He does.
And they get all the shield throwing stuff right, and all the, you know, he's slightly the ultimate Cap when it comes to, like, he's got a little bit of superhuman ability where he's just slightly above human.
Well, he's ultimate Cap in that he is definitely enhanced human, whereas the classic Cap is just peak human. But two things
Didn't say a word.
Oh, sorry, I got a feedback hiccup, and it sounded like you had started to say something. There are two moments in the MCU which really go into how much I love Captain America outside of the personality, and this is in regards to his being a badass, and that is in the beginning of Winter Soldier when they get on the boat and we have Cap come face to face with Batroc.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, Cap switches his fighting stance and fighting set and starts fighting him with the French kickboxing.
Right.
Instead of using his traditional fighting, not sure what the term would be, not expertise, but the traditional way that he does fights.
His fighting style or fighting discipline.
Right. He tailors. He has the knowledge to tailor it to the specific person. And I thought that was so cool in that movie. And then the second thing is in Infinity War, where the superpowered, you might argue overpowered, Scarlet Witch and Vision are getting their butts kicked by these two aliens, and all of a sudden the train shoots by and disappears, and there's Captain America. This human, who we have just said it has enhanced strength and is enhanced human, but still very much a human, just makes them look like shrubs or scrubs. Shrubs. Yeah, it makes them look like shrubs. The big alien threats. They made him and Black Widow, and then Falcon shows up. They really made the alien threat and they look pathetic.
Yeah.
I know. I love both those scenes because they just show how capable Captain America is and versatile.
No, yeah, I completely agree. I think we could talk about Cap forever, and we already have one more to do that we're probably going to talk about for a long time. So let's get on to our number one.
Yeah, the thing with our number one is we have already discussed him quite a few times in previous episodes. We did that in episode 1, actually, in which we completely we devoted that episode entirely to the first film with him. Who's going to say?
Oh, you say it.
My number one, and quite frankly, I'm kind of surprised to see he's your number one, is Christopher Reeve as Superman. Yeah, there was no way my number one was going to be anyone but.
It's my number one because it's the definitive portrayal of Superman. It is the best portrayal of Superman. The first movie is probably the best Superman story outside of the comics, and very high in contention for the best Superman story total. And Batman's my favorite character, and there is not one singular actor in live action film that I can say that about. Right.
The other thing is that Christopher Reeve as Superman is the actor and character. The film, Superman the movie, 1978, is the film that changed the landscape for superheroes in movie and live action completely from that point on.
Yeah, it
before
brings
that,
us...
It was...
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, before that, superheroes in live action were biff, bang, pow, camp.
Right. I was going to say, it brings us the modern superhero movie. The movies that we watch today are the development of the original Superman movie to now. You know, there are major milestones along the way, but it starts with Superman the movie.
Right. The MCU as it exists today would not be possible without Superman the movie, without Christopher Reeve. We see the Christopher Reeve's performance reflected in Chris Evans as Captain America and Gal Gadot in Wonder Woman, to the point where the directors and people involved in the making of the Wonder Woman film and the Captain America film had the actors watch Superman the movie because that was the tone that they wanted for the character and for the movies. I talk about a shadow over everything. Superman the movie stands heads and shoulders as above all of this. None of this is possible without that film.
Right. Yeah, it totally isn't. And I mean, we're going to be repeating ourselves here again from our original episode and from stuff we've said earlier, but you've got this perfectly earnest portrayal of a larger-than-life character who is many consider to be a one-dimensional character because of his worldview, but he's really a layered character, and his worldview goes into that.
Yeah, okay, the thing with Superman is, I was actually having a brief discussion with this in one of my chat rooms. I think it was even last night, and it was that, oh gosh, I'm trying to think of where to start with this. Batman, as played by Adam West, was very much what the character was in the comics at that time, where Batman comics were very ridiculous, quite frankly, in the 50s and 60s. And it really reflected what the comics were. The difference being that they played it as a satire of the comics. The thing with Superman is everyone basically acts as if Superman is one specific character and that there is no real variance to the character in any of the portrayals, which is so blatantly false. Because the Kirk Allen version of Superman back in the 40s was very much just you could make the argument it was just very much a kind of almost a generic 1930s, 1940s movie serial hero, just one with powers. George Reeves very much played the version of the character that was in the comics in the 50s, which was Superman as this father figure looking after his children on Earth, essentially. This very paternal figure. Christopher Reeve went in a completely different route, where we end up with Superman as, we get the moment, the defining moment to me in that Superman the movie is Lois saying, "Who are you?" And Superman just succinctly replying, "A friend," and then flying away saying bye. And that's perfectly what the character is there. And I think it's crazy that people keep refer to the character as not having any depth, where it's possible to do that version of Superman. It's possible to do the 1950s George Reeves version. It's possible to do the darker, more complex, morally complex Henry Cavill, Zack Snyder version. All of this is possible. I don't think the character gets the credit, and really, Christopher Reeve. I swear, some people probably think, and I've quite frankly, I've heard people actually say that Christopher Reeve as Superman was overrated, and that's not true at all.
No, it couldn't be farther from the truth.
The performance that he gives in those movies, even as the movies got worse, is just so layered and multifaceted, and he's constantly playing two different performances in each of those movies. In the third, however idiotic the third film gets, he ends up playing three different roles, and he's completely believable in each of them, and each is distinct from the others. And Christopher Reeve literally When they used this as the tagline, "You will believe a man can fly," it was basically in reference to the special effects. But no, it wasn't the special effects. It was Reeves' performance that made you believe a man could fly. He made this go from being the stuff of cheap camp goofiness to being something that could be a serious, romantic, action-packed, funny, dramatic films. And he made it believable modern day superheroes in film, because it wasn't okay. I have watched Superman the movie so many times, and I've watched it with the commentary track by Richard Donner and Tom Mankiewicz several times, possibly half a dozen. And there's the point in Superman the movie where after his so many years of tutelage in the Fortress of Solitude, we finally get the first glimpse of Superman in costume across, on the other side of the fortress.
Mm-hmm.
And then he all of a sudden just takes off and he flies at the camera. And he was just simply supposed to just fly across the camera. And that would have been cool. It would have been impressive for 1978. But what Reeve did, and no one was expecting, and Donner points it out in that moment in the commentary track, is that Reeve, as he's coming, he was just supposed to come straight ahead, but Reeve banked, and he swoops across, and he made it believable. It didn't look like a guy on ropes. He was a guy on ropes, but he made it completely believable that he was flying.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the power of his performance, is that his performance was so earnest and so respectful of what he was doing. He made every single thing he did seem real and truthful. And we don't get Chris Evans as Captain America. We do not get Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman. We don't even get Heath Ledger as Joker, because each one of those, in their own performances, gave those characters respect and a reality that was true to their character and their portrayals. And none of that is possible if Christopher Reeve didn't do that first.
Right. Yeah, I'm going to let you do a lot of the talking here, because no one's going to talk better about Superman than you are. But yeah, I definitely am agreeing with everything you're saying. It is a fantastic performance. And the scene where he picks up Lois for the date as Clark, and then takes his glasses off, and for a moment is going to tell her that he's Superman, and then changes his mind. I think it's the best scene that any character or any actor playing any superhero has ever delivered. He transforms in front of you.
Yeah. Anyone who says to me that the idea that Superman being able to disguise himself as Clark Kent with a pair of glasses is not believable, I think that scene proves it's possible, because it's the same guy playing Superman playing Clark Kent, but he plays it completely as two separate people, and it is believable that you would accept them as two different people, because his voice changes, his body language is completely different. Everything about it is so distinct. It's just incredible to me watching Reeve switch back and forth between the two so easily and so effortlessly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the idea that the glasses wouldn't be enough. I think they would be.
Hey, let me tell you, as a guy who wears glasses, the glasses are enough. I've gone into work on my day off without my glasses on, with a hat on, or any weird combination of things like that, and had people not recognize me. So,
yeah, the thing is that people expect people see what they want to expect,
right.
And if something does not fit with what they expect, they're apt to not pay attention to it.
Was it before BVS when Cavill did those pictures where he walked around Times Square in a Superman shirt and stood in front of BVS posters, and people didn't recognize that it was him? He was standing in front of himself on a big poster, dressed as
in the
Superman
middle of New York,
in the middle of New York
in the
wearing
middle
a
of
Superman
Times
shirt.
Square, with tourists all around, and no one recognized him.
Right.
He posted a video of that, and I was so impressed. I actually saved it. I still have it on my laptop.
Like you were saying, because people, they expect what they expect.
Right.
No one was expecting Henry Cavill to be walking around Times Square in a Superman shirt.
Uh-huh.
So he blended right in.
Right. It's the idea that, to further what you're saying, if people are used to seeing you with you with glasses or anyone with glasses, and if you were to go, or anyone show up somewhere with contacts, people aren't going to instantly recognize them because it's not what they expect. It's the idea that I always thought it was weird in the Silver Age or comics, especially the 1950s and 1960s comics, where Lois was constantly trying to figure out what Superman's secret identity was. As a kid, I never understood that, because as a child, I always wondered, why would people assume that Superman had a secret identity? They know he's an alien from another world, and he spends to them, he seems to spend all his time saving people from disasters and stopping crime around the actual world. Why would people assume that he was also holding a 9-to-5 day job? I think that if you lived in the world of the DCU, you would never stop. You might think, oh yeah, Clark Kent has a passing resemblance to Superman. That's weird. I would totally get that. People think it's strange that they have a bit of a similarity to them. But why would people assume that they were the same guy? I've never understood that argument, because why would you think that Superman, the most powerful being on the planet, would put himself through the day-to-day grind of a newspaper reporter who constantly trying to meet deadlines? I don't see why people would assume that would be the thing. I think it would be a shock more than anything.
I mean, that goes to the bit from the 80s comics where Luthor pays someone to figure out Superman's secrets or whatever, and they basically figure out that he's got a secret identity and he's Clark Kent, and Luthor says, this is ridiculous. He wouldn't spend his time as a schlub reporter doing whatever.
He'd live in a castle of diamonds.
Yeah.
Although he has that. He does.
He does.
Oh God, yeah. That is basically that was the genius of that issue, was that John Byrne, who wrote that, basically got rid of that argument right from the very beginning of his run, because I think Luthor's point of view in that scene would completely fit with most people's point of view. No, I don't think anyone would, in their right mind, stop and think, boy, Superman, this alien who told everyone that his name is really Kal-El of Krypton, and I heard in the middle of the night that he was fighting bushfires in Africa and stopping a tsunami off Japan. Yeah, he was probably working on a human interest story for the Daily Planet at the same time about dogs. I don't believe it. I don't believe that people would believe that he was living a dual life.
No, yeah, it makes total sense. Like, why would anyone even come up with the thought that he might possibly lead a double life?
And the point for this entire argument is that Christopher Reeve, more than anyone before and really anyone since, really embodies that, because he more than anyone else played the characters as completely distinct from each other, and beautifully. Yeah, that moment in Superman the movie is just wonderfully acted. I'm not sure what else to say about this.
Yeah, I think that brings it to an end for us. There's not too much else to say. So that is our list, and that is Derek and Matt Love Comics for the week. Remember, you can send us emails, comments, questions. Let us know what your list is. Or did you disagree with our list? Let us know. DerekandMattLoveComics@gmail.com, on Facebook at facebook.com/DerekandMatt, on Twitter at DerekandMatt, on Instagram at DerekandMatt, and on YouTube, our channel is Derek and Matt Love Comics. Find us on iTunes, Podbeam, Stitcher, Google Play, and TuneIn. Subscribe and rate us on iTunes. We really appreciate the rating. And if you have any questions on Galactic Gregs, you can visit galacticgregs.com or facebook.com/galacticgregs. Next week on Derek and Matt Love Comics. Derek, what are we doing?
You take the good, you take the bad, you take them both, and then you have Invincible Volume 5, The Facts of Life.
It seems like we just did the last volume. I know we didn't because we had Halloween Mania in October, but I'm looking forward to this because we're starting to get to the point where I don't remember exactly everything that happens when, in what order or whatever. So,
oh yeah, yeah. All the major stuff that really sets up the series is all done. And now we are veering off.
Right. Now we're just into the comic proper as to the things that are kind of going to happen to him day to day while the bigger story is also moving on in the background. So we'll look forward to that next week. Music for this episode is the Hero Theme and Adventure Meme by Kevin MacLeod, Incompetech.com. Licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 3.0 license. Derek, any last words?
I don't want to kill anyone. I don't like bullies. I don't care where they're from.
I believe that whatever doesn't kill you simply makes you stranger.